Marcus wiped grease from his hands with an old rag, the familiar smell of engine oil and metal filling his nostrils. The repair bay of Station Omega-7 hummed with the constant background noise of air recyclers and power generators. It wasn't glamorous work, but someone had to keep the mining station running, and Marcus had been doing it for the better part of 15 years. The wrench slipped from his fingers as something massive crashed into the outer hull. Emergency lights bathed everything in red, and the station's AI began its monotone warnings about hull breaches and depressurization protocols. Marcus grabbed his emergency suit from the wall locker, his movements quick and practiced despite the adrenaline surge. Through the reinforced porthole of the repair bay, he saw something that made him question his sanity. A creature the size of a small starship floated in the vacuum of space, its body covered in what looked like metallic scales that caught the light from the station's external beacons. Wings that spanned nearly 100 meters were folded against its serpentine body, and a head that belonged in ancient Earth mythology turned toward the station with eyes like burning stars. A dragon. An actual living dragon in space. The creature's massive claws scraped against the hull as it positioned itself near the main airlock. Marcus could see damage along its flank, deep gouges that leaked some kind of luminescent fluid into the void. Whatever had hurt this thing had weapons that could punch through scales that looked harder than military-grade armor plating. The communication system crackled to life, filled with static and an underlying harmonic that made Marcus's teeth ache. When the voice came through, it was like listening to a symphony of wind chimes mixed with the rumble of distant thunder. "Please," the voice said, and Marcus felt his heart stop. "I mean no harm to your kind. I need only a small amount of sustenance. Just a bit of food, sir." The politeness in that cosmic voice was jarring. Here was a creature that could probably tear the station apart with its bare claws, asking permission like a lost traveler at a roadside diner. Marcus looked around the empty repair bay, realizing he was probably the only person who had heard the transmission. The rest of the crew would be in the emergency shelters by now, following standard protocol for unknown contacts. He activated his personal communicator, bypassing the station's main channels. "This is Marcus Chen in Repair Bay 7. I'm reading you, He paused, not sure how to address a space dragon. "What do I call you?" "I am Zephyros of the Void Wanderers," came the reply, tinged with what sounded like relief. "You are the first of the young races to speak with me rather than fire upon me. I have been traveling for many cycles, fleeing those who would see my kind extinct. My energy reserves are nearly depleted." Marcus pulled up the station's external cameras on his work terminal, getting a better view of the creature. The damage was worse than he had initially thought. Those weren't just scratches. They were precise cuts, the kind made by energy weapons designed specifically to penetrate draconic scales. Whoever had attacked Zephyros knew exactly what they were hunting. "What kind of food do you need?" Marcus asked, already running through the station's inventory in his head. They had standard human rations, algae protein supplements, and various minerals for the mining operation. "I subsist on refined metals and crystalline energy matrices," Zephyros explained. "In your terms, I believe you would call them rare earth elements and power cells. I require only a small amount, enough to reach the next sanctuary world." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. The station's most valuable resources were exactly what this creature needed to survive. Protocol demanded he report this to the station commander immediately. Any unauthorized distribution of mining materials was considered theft of corporate property, punishable by termination and criminal charges. But as he watched the great creature's labored breathing through the camera feed, Marcus found himself thinking about something his grandfather had told him years ago. "Son," the old man had said, "there comes a time when you have to choose between what's legal and what's right. The law ain't always moral, and sometimes being human means breaking a few rules." The station's internal comm system crackled to life. Commander Holt's voice echoed through the corridors. "All personnel remain in emergency stations. Unknown hostile has made contact with our hull. Security teams are preparing to repel boarders. Do not attempt communication with the entity." Marcus looked at his tool chest, then at the storage lockers containing various rare metals needed for repairs. He had access codes to the restricted materials vault, a privilege that came with his senior mechanic status. If he was going to help Zephyros, he had to do it now, before security locked down everything and started shooting. "Zephyros," he said into his communicator, I can get you what you need, but I need you to move to Docking Bay 3. It's on the far side of the station from the security center. Can you do that without causing more damage? You would risk yourself for a stranger? The dragon asked, and Marcus could hear genuine surprise in that musical voice. Let's just say I believe in helping folks who need it, Marcus replied, already gathering the tools he would need. My grandfather taught me that hospitality is a universal language. Through the camera feed, he watched as Zephyros carefully maneuvered away from the main hull, using small puffs of what looked like controlled plasma to adjust his position. The creature moved with surprising grace for something so massive, clearly trying to minimize contact with the station's structure. Marcus sealed his emergency suit and headed for the maintenance tunnels that would take him to Docking Bay 3. Behind him, the repair bay's automated systems continued their routine diagnostics, oblivious to the fact that their operator was about to commit what might be considered an act of interstellar piracy. As he crawled through the cramped maintenance shaft, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that this was one of those moments his grandfather had warned him about. The moment when an ordinary person had to decide what kind of human being they really were. In the distance, he could hear Commander Holt organizing the security response. Soon they would realize that someone was moving through the station's service areas. But for now, Marcus had a small window of opportunity to do something that felt fundamentally right, even if it was completely against regulations. The tunnel emerged into Docking Bay 3's control room, and Marcus began the process of pressurizing the bay. Outside, through the massive transparent aluminum windows, Zephyros waited patiently in the void, his stellar eyes fixed on the station with an expression that somehow managed to convey both hope and ancient dignity. The maintenance corridors of Station Omega 7 weren't designed for quick travel, but Marcus had spent enough years crawling through them to know every shortcut. His breathing echoed inside his emergency suit helmet as he made his way toward the restricted materials vault. Emergency lighting cast strange shadows through the transparent aluminum panels, and he could hear the distant sound of security teams mobilizing. Commander Holt's voice crackled through the station's communication system. Security Team Alpha, report to Docking Bay 1. Beta Team, establish a perimeter around the main airlock. We treat this as a potential hostile boarding action until proven otherwise. Marcus reached the vault access terminal and paused. His clearance codes would leave a digital trail leading straight back to him. Once he opened this door, there would be no pretending he wasn't involved. He thought about his pension, his quarters on the station, the life he had built over 15 years of faithful service. Then he remembered the politeness in Zephyros's voice, the careful way the massive creature had moved to avoid damaging the station, and the obvious wounds that spoke of a desperate flight from something terrible. His grandfather's voice echoed in his memory. When someone asks for help, you don't check their credit rating first. Marcus entered his access codes. The vault door slid open with a soft hiss, revealing rows of carefully organized containers, holding the rare earth elements that made faster-than-light travel possible. Each container was worth more than Marcus would make in 5 years, but he wasn't thinking about money now. He selected several pounds of refined tritanium, some crystallized energy cells, and a handful of exotic matter containers that hummed with barely contained power. His suit's carrying capacity was limited, so he had to make choices. Marcus grabbed what looked like the highest energy density materials and sealed them in a transport case designed for volatile substances. The case's built-in anti-grav units would make it easier to maneuver in the docking bay's low-gravity environment. As he made his way toward Docking Bay 3, Marcus's communicator buzzed with an incoming transmission. The harmonic quality told him it was Zephyros before the dragon even spoke. Marcus Chen, the voice resonated through his helmet speakers. I detect movement throughout your station. Are you in danger because of me? Nothing I can't handle, Marcus replied, though he wasn't entirely sure that was true. Just keep quiet and stay near Bay 3, I'm almost there. Your kindness honors your species, Zephyros said. I had heard stories of human compassion, but I confess I thought them exaggerated. Most races become more cautious as they advance technologically. Marcus reached the docking bay's control room and began the complex process of opening the massive doors. The bay was designed for cargo shuttles and small ships, not creatures the size of Zephyros, but it would have to do. Through the observation windows, he could see the dragon floating patiently in space, occasionally adjusting his position with small bursts of plasma from what looked like natural thrusters along his flanks. Most humans are cautious too, Marcus admitted as he worked. But my grandfather always said that caution without compassion isn't wisdom. It's just fear dressed up in fancy clothes. The docking bay doors began their slow cycle, revealing the star-filled void beyond. Zephyros moved closer, his massive form dwarfing the bay opening. Up close, Marcus could see the intricate patterns etched into the dragon's scales, designs that seemed to shift and flow like living artwork. The creature's eyes were indeed like stars, not metaphorically but literally burning with some kind of internal fusion process. "I am extending a manipulation appendage," Zephyros announced. "Do not be alarmed." A section of the dragon's chest opened like a flower, revealing a smaller, more delicate limb that ended in what looked like a cross between a hand and a sensor array. The appendage reached into the docking bay with precise, almost surgical movements. Marcus activated the bay's gravity generators and carefully maneuvered the transport case toward the dragon's extended limb. As soon as the case made contact, it began to glow with a soft blue light. Marcus could see energy patterns flowing across Zephyros's scales as the dragon somehow absorbed the materials through direct contact. "Remarkable," Zephyros murmured, and for the first time his voice carried undertones of relief. "Your metallurgy is quite sophisticated for such a young civilization. This tritanium has been refined to a purity level I have not encountered in 3 centuries. We're pretty good with our hands," Marcus said, watching the energy patterns spread across the dragon's body like a gentle aurora. "It's one of the things we're known for." "Indeed. I begin to understand why the hegemony fears your kind." The word sent a chill through Marcus. "The hegemony?" "The alliance that hunts my people," Zephyros explained, his voice carrying an edge of ancient sadness. "They see dragons as a threat to their ordered universe. We are too powerful, too independent, too difficult to control. They have been systematically exterminating us for millennia." Marcus watched as the dragon's wounds began to close, the luminescent fluid sealing itself back into the creature's body. "But you're not aggressive. You asked politely for help." "A predator asks for nothing," Zephyros replied. "But the hegemony believes that any species capable of independent thought and action is eventually a threat. They prefer their universe predictable and manageable. Your humans, I suspect, represent exactly the kind of chaos they seek to eliminate." The implications of this hit Marcus like a physical blow. If this hegemony was hunting dragons for being too independent, what would they do when they discovered humanity? Humans were nothing if not independent, chaotic, and unpredictable. "Have they found Earth?" Marcus asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. "Not yet, but they are searching. Your expansion into space has not gone unnoticed. There are rumors that hegemony scout ships have been probing your outer colonies." Marcus's communicator suddenly exploded with chatter from the station's security teams. Commander Holt's voice cut through the noise. "Maintenance Chief Chen, report to your station immediately. We show unauthorized access to Vault 7 and an open docking bay. Respond immediately." "You must go," Zephyros said, beginning to withdraw his manipulation appendage. "I am sufficiently restored to continue my journey. But Marcus Chen, there is something you must know." "What?" "The materials you have given me. They contain trace quantum signatures unique to your manufacturing processes. If the hegemony finds them, they will be able to trace them back to human space." Marcus felt his stomach drop. "You're saying I've just painted a target on humanity?" "Perhaps. Or perhaps you have given us the beginning of an alliance that could save both our species." The dragon's stellar eyes seemed to intensify. "There is a place beyond the spiral arm where free peoples gather in secret. If your kind ever needs sanctuary or allies in the darkness, remember the name, Haven's Edge." The docking bay's proximity alarms began blaring as security teams approached. Marcus started the door-closing sequence, knowing he had only minutes before Commander Holt would be demanding explanations he couldn't give. "Will I see you again?" Marcus asked. "Perhaps sooner than either of us expects," Zephyros replied. "The universe has a way of bringing allies together when darkness approaches. Remember, Marcus Chen, what you have done today may echo across the stars." As the docking bay doors sealed shut, Marcus watched the great dragon disappear into the void, moving with renewed strength toward the distant stars. Behind him, he could hear security teams pounding on the control room door. The security teams burst into the docking bay control room, just as Marcus was shutting down the external cameras. Commander Holt strode in behind them, his face red with anger and confusion. The commander was a career military man who had never quite adapted to the irregular challenges of running a civilian mining operation on the frontier. "Chen, what the hell is going on here?" Holt demanded, his eyes scanning the control panels for evidence of what had transpired. "We show vault access under your codes, an unauthorized bay opening, and you're nowhere to be found during a station emergency." Marcus had spent the last few minutes preparing for this moment, running through possible explanations in his head. The truth was obviously out of the question. No one would believe him, and even if they did, it would only make things worse. He settled on a version that was technically accurate, if not completely honest. "I detected unusual energy signatures in Bay 3's systems during the emergency," Marcus said, keeping his voice steady. "Given the proximity of that unknown contact, I thought it might be some kind of scanning or infiltration attempt. I accessed the vault to get some rare earth materials for shielding." "And did you find evidence of scanning?" Holt asked, though his tone suggested he was already skeptical. "The readings were inconclusive," Marcus replied, "but the contact has moved off and the energy signatures have returned to normal. Whatever it was, it's gone now." Security Chief Rodriguez stepped forward, her expression thoughtful. Unlike Holt, she had been born on the frontier and understood that strange things happened in deep space. "Marcus, I've known you for 8 years. You're not the type to break protocol without a damn good reason. What aren't you telling us?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I did what I thought was best to protect the station. Sometimes that means making judgment calls that don't fit neatly into the manual." Rodriguez studied him for another long moment, then nodded slowly. "The contact made no hostile moves, showed no weapon signatures, and departed without incident. From a security standpoint, I'm calling this a successful first contact scenario." "First contact?" Holt's voice cracked slightly. "Rodriguez, that thing was the size of a battleship. It could have destroyed us, but it didn't," Rodriguez pointed out. "It approached peacefully, maintained position without causing damage, and left when its business was concluded. That sounds like textbook non-hostile contact to me." Marcus felt a surge of gratitude toward the security chief. She was giving him an out, whether she fully believed his story or not. It was another example of frontier practicality trumping bureaucratic procedure. "I want a full inventory of everything accessed from Vault 7, Holt ordered. "And I want detailed sensor logs of the entire incident transmitted to corporate headquarters." "Of course, sir," Marcus replied. "I'll have the reports ready within the hour." As the security team filed out, Rodriguez lingered behind. Once they were alone, she stepped closer to Marcus and lowered her voice. "I don't know what really happened here today," she said quietly, "but I know you well enough to trust your judgment. Just remember that the next time something like this happens, you don't have to handle it alone. That's what the security team is for." "Understood," Marcus said. "And Rodriguez?" "Thanks." She nodded and headed for the door, pausing only to add, "Try to stay out of trouble for the rest of the week, will you? My reports are complicated enough already." Alone in the control room, Marcus slumped into a chair and finally allowed himself to process what had really happened. He had just helped a space dragon evade what sounded like an interstellar genocide campaign, possibly exposed humanity to scrutiny from a hostile alien alliance, and somehow managed to avoid a court-martial. It was definitely not how he had planned to spend his Tuesday. Over the next few hours, Marcus dutifully filed his reports, carefully crafting a narrative that would satisfy corporate oversight without revealing anything that might endanger Zephyros or attract unwanted attention to Station Omega-7, and the materials inventory was trickier. The missing elements would be noticed eventually, but he managed to attribute them to emergency shielding protocols during anomalous contact. 3 days later, Marcus was running routine diagnostics on the station's power grid when his personal communicator received an encrypted transmission. The signal was unlike anything in human technology, a complex quantum encryption that made his equipment struggle to maintain coherence. When the message finally resolved, it was Zephyros's voice, though much fainter than before. "Marcus Chen, I greet you across the void. I have reached the sanctuary I spoke of thanks to your generosity, but I bring troubling news." Marcus quickly checked to make sure he was alone in the engineering section before responding. "I'm listening." "Hegemony scout ships have been detected near your outer colonies. 3 vessels, heavily armed, conducting what your people would call reconnaissance in force. They are testing your defenses and studying your technology. Marcus felt his blood run cold. How long do we have? Unknown. The hegemony moves slowly when dealing with new species. They prefer to understand their enemies completely before striking. But Marcus Chen, there is something else. Something that may give your people hope. What? The materials you provided? The refined titanium and energy matrices? They are of exceptional quality. Better than anything the hegemony produces. If your entire species possesses such manufacturing capabilities, you may be able to create weapons and defenses they cannot easily overcome. Marcus thought about humanity's industrial capacity, the vast manufacturing complexes on Earth and the growing colonies, the relentless human drive to build, improve, and innovate. We're good at making things, he admitted. It's sort of our specialty. Then there is hope. But your leaders must be warned and they must prepare. The hegemony will not announce their intentions. When they strike, it will be without warning and with overwhelming force. How do I convince anyone of this? I'm just a maintenance chief on a mining station. Nobody's going to believe me. You may not need to convince them directly, Zephyros replied. There are others among your kind who have begun to suspect the truth. Scientists who have detected anomalous signals, military officers who have noticed strange sensor readings, explorers who have found the remnants of other civilizations that encountered the hegemony. Marcus walked to the nearest observation port and stared out at the stars. Somewhere out there, alien scouts were studying humanity, preparing for an attack that might come tomorrow or next year. And here he was, a simple mechanic with knowledge that could save or doom his entire species. What should I do? He asked. Continue to be human, Zephyros replied. Your species' greatest strength is not your technology or your weapons. It is your capacity for unexpected kindness and irrational courage. When the darkness comes, remember that you once helped a stranger in the void, simply because it was the right thing to do. The transmission began to fade as Zephyros moved beyond communication range. His final words were barely audible. Tell your people about Haven's Edge. When the time comes, they will need allies among the stars. Marcus stood alone in the observation lounge, watching the stars and wondering if any of them might harbor hegemony ships. He was just one man with impossible knowledge and no clear way to act on it. But his grandfather had always said that sometimes one person in the right place at the right time could change everything. The universe had just become a much more dangerous place. But it had also become a place where humans had at least one friend among the stars. Marcus pulled out his personal data pad and began composing a message to his cousin Sarah, who worked in Colonial Defense Command Intelligence. He might just be a mechanic, but he knew how to plant seeds of information in the right places. The fight for humanity's future was about to begin, and it had started with a simple act of kindness in the void. 6 months had passed since Marcus's encounter with Zephyros, and the galaxy had begun to change in subtle but unmistakable ways. Reports filtered in through official channels and underground networks about strange ship movements in the outer territories, unexplained signal intercepts, and the mysterious disappearance of 3 colonial survey teams. Marcus had sent his carefully worded message to cousin Sarah in Colonial Defense Intelligence, disguising his warnings as concerns about unusual sensor readings and equipment malfunctions. He had no way of knowing if his information was being taken seriously, but recent increases in military patrols and the deployment of new listening posts suggested that someone, somewhere, was paying attention. The morning that changed everything started like any other. Marcus was replacing worn coolant lines in the station's reactor assembly when the proximity alarms began blaring throughout Station Omega 7. This time, however, the alarm pattern was different, not the steady wail of an emergency, but the rapid staccato bursts that indicated multiple incoming contacts. Commander Holt's voice echoed through the corridors with barely controlled panic. All hands to emergency stations. We have 15. 23 unknown vessels approaching on Vector 77 Mark IV. Ships are not responding to hail attempts and are maintaining attack formation. Marcus dropped his tools and ran to the nearest observation deck, his heart hammering as he recognized the sleek, angular silhouettes approaching the station. These weren't human ships with their practical function-over-form designs. These vessels looked like they had been grown rather than built, their surfaces flowing and organic. With weapon ports that glowed with ominous energy, the hegemony had found them. The lead ship was massive, easily 3 times the size of a human. cruiser, and the smaller vessels flanking. It moved with predatory precision. As Marcus watched, energy weapons began charging along their hulls, painting the vacuum with deadly light. "All civilian personnel to emergency bunkers immediately," Commander Holt announced. "This is not a drill. Security teams to defensive positions." But Marcus knew that the station's defensive capabilities were laughable against this kind of force. Omega-7 was a mining facility, not a fortress. Its weapons were designed to break up asteroids, not fight off alien warships. They had maybe 10 minutes before the hegemony ships opened fire and turned the station into expanding debris. As he started toward the emergency bunkers, Marcus's communicator crackled with an impossible transmission. The harmonic quality was unmistakable. Zephyros was somehow nearby. "Marcus Chen, can you hear me?" The dragon's voice was tight with urgency. "I have been monitoring hegemony communications. They are not here by chance. They have traced quantum signatures from refined materials back to this location." Marcus felt his stomach drop. The materials he had given Zephyros had indeed led the hegemony here, just as the dragon had feared. His act of kindness had doomed everyone on the station. "I'm sorry," Marcus whispered into his communicator. "I've killed us all." "No," Zephyros replied firmly. "You have given me the opportunity to repay a debt, and you have provided proof that humans are worth saving. I am not alone, Marcus Chen. Word of human compassion has spread among the free peoples." Through the observation port, Marcus saw something that made him question his sanity for the second time in 6 months. Space itself seemed to ripple, and then ships began appearing as if materializing from thin air. Not just one or two, but dozens of them, each unique in design and clearly belonging to different species. There were vessels that looked like living coral formations, ships that appeared to be made of crystallized light, and massive constructs that seemed to be held together by controlled gravitational fields. And among them, graceful and terrible in their alien beauty, were dragons. Not just Zephyros, but an entire flight of them, their scales reflecting the light of distant stars as they positioned themselves between the hegemony fleet and the human station. Hegemony vessels, Zephyros's voice now carried across all communication frequencies, no longer directed just at Marcus but broadcasting to both fleets. "You have entered sovereign space claimed by the Free People's Alliance. Your presence here violates the Treaty of Broken Chains." The response came in a cold, mechanical voice that seemed to emerge from the lead hegemony ship. "Dragon, you are in violation of Hegemony Directive 77 Alpha. This system contains a developing species that poses a potential threat to galactic order. Stand aside or be destroyed." "The humans are under our protection," Zephyros replied. "They have proven themselves worthy of alliance through acts of compassion and courage. Your extinction protocols are no longer valid here." Marcus watched in amazement as the Free People's ship spread into what was clearly a battle formation. The Dragonflight positioned themselves at the front, their massive forms dwarfing even the largest vessels. Energy began building along their scales, and Marcus realized he was about to witness something that would redefine humanity's understanding of warfare. "All station personnel, secure for combat," Commander Holt announced, though his voice carried a note of bewilderment. "We appear to have allies." The first exchange of fire lit up space like a miniature sun going nova. The hegemony ships launched what looked like streams of coherent plasma, while the dragons responded with beams of pure stellar energy that made human weapons look like flashlights. The allied ships added their own exotic weapons to the mix: gravitational distortions that twisted space itself, quantum disruption fields that made enemy ships flicker in and out of existence, and energy waves that seemed to convert matter directly into light. But it was the dragons that truly defied comprehension. They moved through space like they were swimming through water, their massive forms somehow achieving impossible maneuvers that violated everything Marcus knew about physics. When a hegemony ship managed to score a direct hit on one of the smaller dragons, the creature's scale simply absorbed the energy and redirected it back at their attacker with devastating effect. "Marcus Chen," Zephyros's voice cut through the chaos, "your people must understand what they are witnessing. This is the choice that faces every species that achieves faster than light. Travel. Join the hegemony's ordered universe or stand with the free, peoples who refuse to surrender their independence." Through the observation port, Marcus watched as 3 hegemony ships exploded in brilliant flashes, their debris scattered by the vacuum. But the alien alliance was taking losses too. One of the coral-like vessels had been crippled, and a dragon was limping away from the battle with obvious injuries. "How did you find us?" Marcus asked, still struggling to process what he was seeing. "We have been watching human space for months," Zephyros replied, his voice strained as he coordinated the battle. "Your cousin Sarah's intelligence reports reached the right people. When the hegemony scout ships were detected, we knew this moment was inevitable. The question was whether humanity would face it alone or with allies. The battle was turning in favor of the Free People's Alliance, but Marcus could see more hegemony ships approaching from deeper space. This was just the beginning of something much larger. "What happens now?" Marcus asked. "Now your species chooses," Zephyros replied. "The hegemony will return with larger fleets. They cannot allow a species like humanity to exist free and independent. It threatens everything they believe about how the universe should be ordered. Your people must decide whether to surrender their freedom for safety, or fight for the right to determine their own destiny." As the last of the hegemony ships exploded or fled into hyperspace, Marcus realized that humanity had just been thrust onto a galactic stage they never knew existed. The quiet life of a maintenance chief on a mining station was over. The war for humanity's future had begun, and it had started because a simple mechanic had chosen to help a stranger in need. The stars would never look the same again. The aftermath of the battle left Station Omega-7 in a state of controlled chaos. Emergency crews worked around the clock to repair damage from debris impacts, while communication arrays buzzed with traffic to and from Earth as humanity tried to process the reality of first contact with not one, but dozens of alien species. Marcus found himself at the center of it all. No longer just a maintenance chief, but the only human who had prior contact with the Free People's Alliance. Commander Holt had been relieved of duty pending a full investigation, replaced by Colonel Sarah Chen, Marcus's cousin, who had arrived on the fastest courier ship Earth could dispatch. "You've certainly made things interesting," Sarah said as she reviewed Marcus's detailed report in the station's conference room. The family resemblance was strong, the same dark hair and stubborn jaw that had gotten both of them into trouble as children. "I helped a hungry traveler," Marcus replied, still somewhat overwhelmed by the attention. "I didn't plan to start an interstellar war." "According to these reports, the war was already coming," Sarah said, scrolling through intelligence data on her tablet. "We've been tracking anomalous signals in ship movements for months. Your dragon friend didn't cause this. He gave us advance warning." Through the conference room's windows, Marcus could see the Free People's Alliance fleet maintaining position around the station. The dragons floated in formation like living spacecraft, while the other allied vessels displayed technologies that human scientists were frantically trying to understand. First contact protocols had been thrown out the window in favor of pragmatic cooperation, born of mutual necessity. "The preliminary technology assessments are sobering," Sarah continued. "The hegemony ships that attacked us were using weapons that could sterilize entire planets. Without our new allies, humanity wouldn't have lasted 10 minutes in a real fight. But we have allies now," Marcus pointed out. "That has to count for something." "It does, but it also makes us a target. Earth's government is divided on how to respond. Some want to negotiate with the hegemony, try to find a peaceful solution. Others are pushing for immediate military alliance with the Free Peoples." Marcus thought about his conversation with Zephyros, about the hegemony's systematic extermination of independent species. "Peace isn't an option, is it?" "Not with the hegemony." "Probably not," Sarah admitted. "According to the intelligence we've gathered, the hegemony doesn't negotiate with species they consider chaotic elements. They conquer or destroy, nothing in between." A soft chime indicated an incoming transmission, and the conference room's main screen activated to show Zephyros's magnificent head. The dragon looked tired, his stellar eyes dimmed from the recent battle, but his voice remained strong. "Cousins Chen," he said, somehow managing to convey both formality and warmth, "I bring word from the Alliance Council. They have voted to offer humanity full membership in the Free People's Alliance, with all the protections and responsibilities that entails." "What exactly does that mean?" Sarah asked, though Marcus could tell she was trying not to stare at the dragon's impossible beauty. "It means that humanity would have access to Alliance technology, military support and protection under our collective defense agreements," Zephyros explained. But it also means accepting responsibility for defending other Alliance worlds when they are threatened. The free peoples stand together, or they fall separately. Marcus leaned forward. What kind of technology are we talking about? Defensive shielding that can deflect hegemony weapons, faster-than-light communication networks that span the galaxy, manufacturing techniques that could revolutionize your industrial capacity. The dragon's eyes seemed to focus directly on Marcus, and perhaps most importantly, the knowledge of how to fight an enemy that has conquered half the known galaxy. Sarah was taking notes rapidly on her tablet. What would Earth need to do to accept this alliance? Your leaders would need to meet with the Alliance Council at Haven's Edge, Zephyros replied. But there is urgency to this decision. Our intelligence networks report that the hegemony is massing a major fleet. The attack on your station was merely a probe. They are preparing for a full-scale invasion of human space. The weight of this revelation settled over the room like a heavy blanket. Marcus had known this moment would come, but the reality of it was still overwhelming. Humanity was being forced to choose between submission and war, with no middle ground available. How long do we have? Sarah asked. Perhaps 6 of your months, possibly less. The hegemony moves slowly, but when they strike, it is with overwhelming force. They will target your major population centers simultaneously, attempting to break your species' will to resist. Marcus stood and walked to the window, looking out at the Alliance fleet. Each ship represented a different species that had faced this same choice, had decided to risk everything rather than surrender their freedom. What are our chances if we fight? Better than you might think, Zephyros replied, and something in his tone made both humans look up sharply. The Alliance has been studying human technology and manufacturing capabilities based on the materials Marcus provided. Your species possesses something remarkable, an ability to innovate under pressure that surpasses anything we have encountered. Meaning what, exactly? Sarah asked. Meaning that in the 6 months since Marcus helped me, human engineers have developed 3 new manufacturing techniques that our scientists thought were impossible. Your industrial capacity is expanding at a rate that defies our mathematical models. If humanity joins the Alliance and shares its technological innovations, we believe we can not only defend against the hegemony, but potentially defeat them entirely. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. You're saying we're not just fighting for survival, we're fighting to win? For the first time in centuries, yes. The hegemony's greatest weakness is their reliance on unchanging, perfected technology. They have not faced a species that innovates as rapidly as humanity does. Your unpredictability could be the key to breaking their empire. Sarah was already composing messages on her tablet, no doubt preparing reports for Earth's government. I'll need detailed technical specifications, strategic assessments, and a full briefing on Alliance capabilities before I can make any recommendations. Of course, Zephyros agreed. I am transmitting data packages now. But Colonel Chen, you should know that time is not our ally. Every day of delay gives the hegemony more opportunity to prepare their assault. As if summoned by his words, the station's proximity alarms began sounding again. This time, however, the incoming signatures were clearly human, a small fleet of Earth Defense Force ships dropping out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. Looks like Earth has sent reinforcements, Sarah observed, watching the tactical display as the human ships took defensive positions. Or investigators, Marcus added quietly. They're going to want answers about what happened here. Then we give them answers, Sarah replied firmly. And we give them the truth. That humanity has just been offered a chance to join something bigger than ourselves, something worth fighting for. Through the communication array, they could hear the incoming Earth fleet hailing Station Omega-7, requesting immediate debriefing and status reports. Marcus knew that within hours this conference room would be filled with admirals, diplomats, and politicians all trying to decide humanity's future. Zephyros, Marcus said, looking directly at the dragon's image. Thank you for everything. Thank you, Marcus Chen, the dragon replied. Your simple act of kindness may have saved more species than you can imagine. When the history of this war is written, it will begin with a human mechanic who chose to help a stranger in need. As the transmission ended and the room fell silent, Marcus realized that his quiet life was truly over. He was no longer just a maintenance chief. He was the bridge between humanity and its new allies, the person who had inadvertently started a revolution that could reshape the galaxy. Outside, Earth's ships were moving into formation with the Alliance fleet, taking the first tentative steps toward a partnership that would either save civilization or lead to its destruction. The choice had been made, even if Earth's government didn't know it yet. The war for freedom had begun, and humanity was no longer alone among the stars. 3 months after the battle at Station Omega-7, Marcus found himself standing on the observation deck of the flagship Prometheus, humanity's first vessel built with Alliance technology. The ship was a marvel of hybrid engineering, human practicality merged with alien innovation to create something entirely new. Through the reinforced windows, he could see the massive space station called Haven's Edge, a structure that seemed to defy physics as it hung in the void between dimensions. Haven's Edge wasn't located in normal space but existed in what the Alliance called a fold pocket, a hidden dimension that could only be accessed by those who knew the specific quantum frequencies required. It served as the Alliance's military headquarters and the safest place in the galaxy to conduct sensitive negotiations. First time seeing. Haven's Edge always takes humans a few minutes to process, said Captain Elena Vasquez, the Prometheus's commanding officer. She was one of the new breed of Earth Defense Force officers who had undergone intensive training with Alliance mentors, learning to think in terms of galactic warfare rather than planetary conflicts. Marcus nodded, still struggling to comprehend the station's scale. Haven's Edge was easily the size of Earth's moon, but it moved and shifted like a living thing. Sections of the station periodically folded into higher dimensions, creating spaces that were larger inside than outside. Alliance engineers had tried to explain the mathematics involved, but human science was still decades away from truly understanding the principles. "The Council is ready for us," Captain Vasquez announced as her communication officer reported the incoming transmission. "Admiral Chen and the Earth delegation are already aboard." Marcus felt a familiar knot in his stomach. Over the past 3 months, he had become humanity's unofficial ambassador to the Alliance, a role he had never wanted and felt completely unqualified for. But his unique relationship with Zephyros and his first-hand knowledge of both human and Alliance perspectives made him invaluable to the ongoing negotiations. The shuttle bay of Haven's Edge was unlike anything in human experience. Gravity seemed to flow in gentle currents rather than pulling in a single direction, allowing ships of wildly different designs to dock at any angle. As Marcus and the human delegation disembarked, they were greeted by a reception committee that looked like something from a fever dream. There was Captain Zixera of the Crystalline Collective, whose body was composed of living geometric patterns that shifted through the visible spectrum. Beside her stood General Korath of the Iron Worlds, a being that looked like it had been carved from living stone but moved with surprising grace. And floating above them all was Zephyros, his massive form somehow fitting comfortably in the bay despite being larger than most human shuttles. "Welcome to Haven's Edge," Zephyros rumbled, his voice carrying harmonics that made the air itself seem to sing. "The Council eagerly awaits humanity's decision." As they made their way through the station's corridors, Marcus was struck by the diversity of beings they encountered. Every species in the Alliance had contributed to Haven's Edge, creating a living testament to what could be achieved when different civilizations worked together. Gardens grown by plant-based intelligences provided oxygen and beauty, while geometric constructs built by machine intelligences provided computational power and navigation. The council chamber was a vast sphere that seemed to exist partially outside normal spacetime. Representatives from 47 different species floated, sat, or hung from various surfaces, each positioned according to their species' environmental needs. At the center of the chamber was a holographic display showing the current state of the galaxy, with hegemony territories marked in ominous red and Alliance worlds shown in defiant blue. "Humans of Earth," spoke the Council's current speaker, a being of pure energy that communicated through controlled lightning patterns. "We have reviewed your species' capabilities and potential. The question before us today is whether humanity will join our alliance as full partners or remain neutral in the coming war." Admiral Sarah Chen, now commanding Earth's space forces, stepped forward. "Honorable Council, humanity is prepared to commit fully to the alliance, but we need guarantees about our independence and territorial sovereignty." A ripple of what might have been amusement passed through the assembled representatives. The speaker's energy patterns shifted to what Marcus had learned was the equivalent of a smile. "Admiral Chen, The Alliance exists precisely to protect the independence of its member species. We are not conquerors seeking to build an empire. We are free peoples united against those who would destroy freedom itself. The holographic display zoomed in on the hegemony territories, showing the methodical advance of their fleets toward Alliance space. The hegemony has begun their offensive, the speaker continued. 17 worlds have fallen in the past month. Their pattern is always the same: overwhelming force, complete destruction of military assets, and the establishment of rigid control over the surviving population. Marcus watched the display with growing horror. Each red dot represented billions of lives lost or enslaved, entire civilizations snuffed out because they refused to surrender their independence. This wasn't just war. It was systematic genocide on a galactic scale. What can humanity contribute to this fight? Asked Counselor Vex of the Synthetic Republic, a mechanical being whose body was a masterwork of engineering and art. Your technology is primitive compared to the hegemonies, and your military forces are small. It was Zephyros who answered, rising to his full impressive height. Honorable Council, humanity possesses something that neither we nor the hegemony fully understand: an unprecedented capacity for innovation under pressure. In the 3 months since first contact, they have developed manufacturing techniques that our best scientists deemed impossible. The display shifted to show comparative technology assessments. Human engineers have improved our shield efficiency by 30%, developed new alloy combinations that are stronger than anything in our databases, and created weapon systems that merge our energy technologies with their kinetic principles in ways that shouldn't work but do. Captain Vasquez stepped forward, activating her personal datapad. If I may demonstrate. At the Council's consent, she transmitted specifications for humanity's latest innovation: hybrid fighters that combined Alliance energy, shielding with human maneuverability and human pilot, intuition with Alliance targeting systems. The assembled representatives examined the data with what Marcus recognized as amazement. Several species began rapid exchanges in their native languages, clearly excited by the implications. Remarkable, the speaker finally said. These designs represent a fusion of technologies that we believed incompatible. How did your engineers achieve this synthesis? By refusing to accept that it was impossible, Marcus found himself saying, surprising everyone including himself by speaking up in the formal council session. Humans have a saying: necessity is the mother of invention. We don't just adapt to circumstances, we change them to suit our needs. The speaker's energy patterns brightened with what Marcus was learning to recognize as intense interest. Marcus Chen, you speak from experience. Tell us about your encounter with Zephyros. So Marcus told them, speaking simply and honestly about that day when a dragon had asked for help and a mechanic had chosen kindness over protocol. He described the moment of decision, the risk he had taken, and the chain of events that had led them all to this chamber. When he finished, the council was silent for a long moment. Then the speaker's voice filled the chamber with something that sounded almost like wonder: a species that chooses compassion over safety, innovation over tradition, and cooperation over domination. The hegemony cannot understand such beings because they have purged these qualities from their own nature. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Humanity was accepted as a full member of the Free People's Alliance, with all the rights and responsibilities that entailed. But more than that, they were asked to take a leading role in developing new strategies and technologies for the war ahead. As the council session ended and the representatives began to disperse, Zephyros approached the human delegation. Marcus Chen, he said quietly, you have done something remarkable today. You have shown the council that humans are not just another species to be protected. They are partners who can help save us all. Marcus looked around the chamber, at the dozens of species who had chosen to stand together against tyranny, and felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. Humanity was no longer alone, but they were also no longer innocent bystanders in a conflict that would determine the fate of the galaxy. The real war was about to begin, and everything would depend on whether human ingenuity could overcome hegemony might. The mechanic who had helped a hungry dragon was about to help reshape the galaxy. 1 year after humanity joined the Free People's Alliance, the war had reached a critical turning point. Marcus stood on the command bridge of the Liberty, the first fully integrated human alliance warship, watching as the largest battle in galactic history unfolded before them. The hegemony had committed their entire reserve fleet to what they called the final pacification, a massive assault, intended to crush the alliance once and for all. But the hegemony had made a fundamental miscalculation. They had planned for the alliance they knew, the one that fought defensive wars with superior individual technology. They hadn't planned for an alliance that included humans. Prometheus Squadron Execute Pattern Delta 7. Admiral Sarah Chen commanded from the flagship's bridge. Around them, the hybrid human alliance fighters moved with deadly precision, using tactics that no hegemony strategist had ever encountered. Where hegemony forces expected predictable formations and time-tested strategies, they found chaos, innovation, and the uniquely human ability to improvise under impossible circumstances. Marcus watched through the tactical displays as Captain Vasquez led her fighter wing in a maneuver that should have been suicide, diving directly into the hegemony's main battle line while broadcasting false surrender codes. At the last second, the fighters deployed new quantum mines developed by human engineers, devices that created temporary black holes just large enough to swallow hegemony ships. Direct hit on the hegemony command vessel, reported Lieutenant Morrison from the sensor station. Their flagship is breaking apart. But the real miracle wasn't in space, it was in the manufacturing sectors of a dozen alliance worlds, where human industrial techniques had revolutionized production capabilities. Factories that had taken months to build a single starship were now producing entire fleets in weeks. The alliance wasn't just fighting better, they were outbuilding the hegemony for the first time in galactic history. Marcus. Zephyros's voice crackled over the communication system from his position with the Dragon flight. Your people's gift for adaptation continues to amaze us. The hegemony is retreating from sectors they've held for centuries. Through the bridge's massive windows, Marcus could see the dragons weaving through the battle like living starships, their scales blazing with captured energy that they redirected at enemy vessels. But it was the sight of human pilots flying alongside alien allies, their fighters dancing between massive hegemony dreadnoughts with impossible grace. That truly took his breath away. Incoming transmission from the Hegemony Supreme Command, Communications Officer Park announced, her voice tight with disbelief. Admiral Chen exchanged glances with Marcus before responding. Put it through. The main screen filled with the image of the Hegemony's Supreme Commander, a being so heavily augmented with technology that little remained of whatever organic species it had originally been. When it spoke, its voice was the cold synthesis of 1,000 different mechanical components. Alliance forces, it said without preamble. The hegemony offers terms for cessation of hostilities. The bridge fell silent. In 3,000 years of galactic warfare, the hegemony had never offered terms to anyone. They conquered or they were destroyed. There was no middle ground in their philosophy. What terms? Admiral Chen asked carefully. Recognition of current territorial boundaries. Immediate cessation of technological exchange between member species. Limitation of individual species' industrial capacity to prevent future threats to galactic order. Marcus felt anger flare in his chest. Even in defeat, the hegemony couldn't understand what they were fighting against. They still don't get it, he said quietly. Get what? Admiral Chen asked. That this was never about territory or technology, Marcus replied, thinking about that day a year ago when a dragon had asked for help and he had chosen kindness over protocol. It's about the right to be different, the right to grow and change and become something unexpected. Zephyros's voice carried across the communication channel, addressing not just the human fleet but the entire Alliance armada. Supreme Commander, your terms are rejected. The Free People's Alliance does not negotiate limitations on freedom. Then you choose extinction, the Supreme Commander replied coldly. No, Marcus found himself saying, his voice carrying across the Alliance communication network to thousands of ships and millions of beings. We choose to live free, which is the only way worth living at all. What happened next would be remembered in the histories of a dozen species as the moment when the galaxy truly changed. The remaining hegemony forces, already demoralized by their unprecedented defeats, began to surrender en masse, not just their ships, but entire worlds that had been under hegemony control for generations declared independence and requested Alliance protection. The Supreme Commander's image flickered and died as his flagship, damaged beyond repair, finally succumbed to the quantum mines that had been eating away at its hull. Around the massive vessel, hegemony ships were either surrendering, fleeing, or being systematically destroyed by Alliance forces that fought with the fury of the free. "Admiral," Communications Officer Park called out, "we're receiving surrender transmissions from 47 hegemony vessels. They're requesting terms." Admiral Chen looked at Marcus, then at the tactical display showing the scattered remnants of what had once been the galaxy's dominant military force. "Tell them the terms are simple," she said. "Unconditional surrender, full disarmament, and acceptance of Alliance oversight during their transition to freedom." "And if they refuse?" Marcus asked. "Then they keep fighting until they learn what we learned today, that freedom isn't something you can defeat with superior firepower. It's an idea, and ideas are bulletproof." As the battle wound down and surrender negotiations began, Marcus found himself thinking about his grandfather's words about hospitality being a universal language. The old man had been right in ways he never could have imagined. A simple act of kindness to a stranger had led to an alliance that reshaped the galaxy. 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same observation lounge on Station Omega-7 where his adventure had begun, watching as the first ships from former hegemony worlds arrived to begin trade negotiations with the Alliance. The galaxy was free for the first time in millennia, and the future stretched ahead bright with possibility. Zephyros materialized beside the station, his massive form somehow managing to look peaceful despite his fearsome appearance. "Marcus Chen," the dragon said, "I have something for you." "What's that?" "A new title. The Alliance Council has voted to name you the first Ambassador of Practical Compassion, a position created specifically to remind us all that the greatest victories begin with the smallest acts of kindness." Marcus laughed, thinking about how far he had come from being a simple maintenance chief. "I think my grandfather would have liked that title." "Then it is fitting," Zephyros replied, "for it was his wisdom, passed through you, that helped save the galaxy." As the dragon departed and the stars wheeled overhead, Marcus knew that his story was far from over. There were new worlds to explore, new species to befriend, and new challenges to face. But for the first time since that day when a desperate voice had asked for just a bit of food, "Sir," Marcus felt confident that whatever came next, the free peoples of the galaxy would face it together. The universe was vast and full of wonders, and humanity had finally found its place among the stars, not as conquerors or subjects, but as friends to all who chose freedom over fear. It was a good place to be, and Marcus Chen, formerly of Station Omega-7's maintenance crew, now Ambassador of Practical Compassion to the Free People's Alliance, looked forward to every day of the journey ahead.